Hello and welcome to For the Love of Nature, a podcast that tells you everything you need to know about nature and probably more than you wanted to know. I'm Laura.
And I'm Katy, and we are back. We took a little bit of a break.
A little bit, yeah, 10 months.
10 months. I almost died, so that was my excuse.
And I just had a complete and utter mental breakdown, pretty much. Not like having to go anywhere, for it, but just I can't do it anymore. It was the most ADHD thing for either of us to do because
oh my God,
we went from being like, I swear to you, when we were last recording, we were like, I can't believe we're still doing this. And then the next week,
next day, we're like,
we ghosted you guys.
Break.
We literally didn't even say, hey, we're actually still alive. Just absolute no communication. Besides, we both checked in with each other. Are you alive? And then that was good. And we just let it be. So we are alive. Thriving, I'm not sure, but alive.
Yeah. So my near death started like last Thanksgiving. I started having a bunch of random, really weird infections that kept spreading throughout my body. They would give me antibiotics and then it would pop up someplace else and it just kept traveling all over my body. Started having all kinds of other weird symptoms that I'd been having off and on for the past few years. That again, I would like ask my doctor about it and be like, hey, this is weird. And they're like, nah, you're getting older. Just deal with it. And then finally, I broke out in hives one day, or what they said were hives.
Because they were real scary.
Yeah, they were like wells, whatever it is. Wells. No,
I was welded. I was welded all over.
Well, they were huge, and it looked like I had leprosy. And so I went into urgent care, and I don't normally react well to prednisone, and so they tried to give me something else. But because my body was already fighting off whatever was going on, they gave me a different shot, which was like a souped up Benadryl dose, but something else. I had a really bad reaction because my body was already doing so much. And I found out my kidneys were failing, my liver was failing. And so they gave me the shot and all my vitals tanked. And I had a poor friend that took me to the urgent care. I just remember going in and out of it. The friend, he's calling my name and I'm like, you need to call my ex-husband because I had to go get Luke that day and stuff. I'm like, you need to call my ex-husband. And I just remember as I'm going in and out of it, the doctor at the urgent care is yelling at the nurses for somebody to call 911. And I just remember being like, I'm in an urgent care. And then I was out of it for a bit. And then I remember the EMTs getting there. And then I was rushed by an ambulance to the ER. They gave me a bunch of Benadryl and stuff there. The hives, literally all the welts, they went away. But then woke up the next morning and they were back, went back to the ER. And that's whenever that doctor there believed me. Because the first doctor and my PCP were like, wow, you probably just changed your detergent or something.
Or they said you ate a potato.
Yeah,
maybe you're allergic to potatoes.
There was all kinds of things that they were like, oh, did you try any new foods recently? And I was like, oh, these turtles that just like their version of goldfish. And they're like, oh, it could be that. I'm like, no, there's no freaking way. So I kept breaking out in those hives for almost like a week off and on. Turns out it's just an autoimmune issue.
Surprise, we're women and we're stressed.
Yeah, and my body just decided it was done. So everybody kept telling me, they're like, oh, it's probably just stress related. I'm like, no, because I do handle stress.
Yes.
Yeah, but I handle stress very, very well. But it's just because I have such a higher threshold for stress than most people. My body was finally like, Katy, you know what? Let's just implode and just hang out and chill for a little bit. So it's lupus. I guess in 1% of folks, most people with lupus get like the butterfly rash on their cheeks and their nose and everything. But 1% of people get hives. And so I'm the lucky 1%. So yeah, so that's been interesting to get used to. Quite the adjustment. If I get sick, I get sick. Just the joint pain and stuff. Like last night, a couple nights ago, I can't even explain how bad the joint pain gets. So it's just adjusting to all of that stuff because literally I was like, I might die because I don't know what's going on. I need a break because it was just.
And I was more than ready to give it to you. I was feeling overwhelmed with school and then my own health. I was having some really weird symptoms that probably were like Lyme stuff.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know, but then I'm feeling weird, but then I also have such bad OCD. I was like, I'm probably just crazy, which is a horrible conclusion to come to, that maybe you're just insane. But then I went to the doctor multiple times. Thankfully, my doctor was like, okay, well, let's test you for all this kinds of stuff. And they were like, oh, well, you actually do have two things wrong with you. you have a cystic ovary, and you have gallstones. So no wonder I was in pain. I was just telling Katie before this, I've like inceptioned myself into thinking that maybe one of my eyeballs is now bigger than the other, which is crazy sounding. But what if it actually is?
Yeah, but what if it is? He just lures in a permanent like, are you winking at me? no, just my one eyeball is just smaller. It's fine.
I'm decrepit. I'm an ancient.
It was ridiculous. I got into a great doctor where I was part of a study and stuff, and so they're still watching my blood results and everything like that, because like my kidneys and liver and stuff are just all
They're
over
not
the
what
place.
they used to be.
Yeah, right. Not what they used to be. You know, failing, it's fine. So yeah, so that's where we were.
But we're glad to be back. We both messaged each other just
very
to like
much so.
checking in every once in a while, like, hey, how's it going? And then I miss it. Maybe we should try again.
Well, and I did the new cover art. That kind of hyped it up too.
Yeah, you guys who are watching this now, it's so cool.
We're always laughing that I am a kookaburra.
Yeah, because remember that came up in some episode where you were like, that is my spirit animal.
Oh, 100%.
And like, whether or not I want to be a fox, I just am a fox. By de facto. I'm like, it's pretty accurate. I might be a little more sociable than a fox, but probably pretty accurate.
Yeah. So I love it. I really like it.
Well, we think we got a pretty good season, and if you had listened to us in the last couple of seasons, we got kind of into a pretty good rhythm of science, light science, guest speaker, funny, and we are rolling through it. We are kind of
F that this season.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like, yes and no. We just can't, we don't immediately have guests lined up, but we're doing our best here, and we cannot do what we've done in the past. Like, when we said, do we want to get back together? Yes, we do, but we cannot commit to one another as much, because it's a 3-hour process every week to get one of these episodes done, and I can't do it every week. I just can't. What we're going to do, guys, is we're going to do full episode, mini-sode. So you will hear our beautiful voices every week. It just won't be full on.
Yeah. But the mini-sodes are going to be awesome. I'm actually kind of looking forward to those. So we're going to be doing mini-sodes. It's going to be called Cave Chronicles. So every season now moving forward, the mini-sodes that are going to happen every other week are going to be themed of some sort. And so this one for this season, we're going to be talking about caves.
And things they've discovered in there, whether it be cultural, archaeological, or biological.
And man, the ones that I've picked so far, they're going to be pretty good.
I've been talking about them at work all week. It's all because since I work at the nature center, I'm like, guys, did you know this about moss?
Yeah. Which, I mean, at least that's relevant.
And thankfully, they're my people. Yeah. Right? Like, they're like, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool.
So I'm looking forward to the cave ones. I'm looking forward to, I mean, all the episodes I think we have.
Yeah, I'm just ready to laugh again, Katie. It's not that I don't laugh without you, but, like, I need this therapy. Like, I need the just ridiculousness.
Our stupidity. So we're up to 90 countries now around the world.
Mind-blowing.
The first one that we're going to be talking about is microcosms, or microecosystems can be found all around us if we simply look close enough. Now, this is a topic that I will talk anyone's ear off about.
For both of us, I just love tiny things. I like tiny things, and I like moss, which is what I'm going to be talking about. So,
do you want to go first then?
Well, you can go first with yours, but I wanted to just introduce everybody to, like you said, we're talking about microcosms. What even is that? So we're talking about micro everything. So let's talk about the differences in some terminology here. Micro meaning small. There are microhabitats. They are localized and small scale, little environments. And a habitat, I feel like a lot of people get like habitats and ecosystems and stuff like that all interchanged. But a habitat is what you're talking about for one species. Like, yes, many species share the same space, but a habitat refers to one species. Microbiome, on the other hand, a lot of times you hear that word when you talk about like your gut flora because it's all the microbes.
That's your example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look up microbiome, that's immediately what comes up.
Yeah. No,
it's hard to find anything else. But it's any kind of microbe life that could be in the soil and the water in your gut. And then you've got microcosms and microecosystems. Now, those things can be used interchangeably. And ecosystems are everything living in one spot. So a habitat is when you're talking about just like one species and their home, but an ecosystem is everything. So it is literally a little world, a microcosm, small world. It's the same as a regular ecosystem, but smaller, which is a place where multiple species interact with one another and all of their non-living environment. So it includes food chains and hierarchies and cycles and all kinds of stuff. It is the inner workings of a tiny little universe. And a lot of times these microcosms can be made in a lab so that they can study something just in a bubble, essentially. But they can happen in nature. And that's what Katy and I are going to talk about. 2 different examples of microcosms that you can find in just the real world. So if you want to take yours away first.
Yeah. So I've definitely touched on this before in prior episodes because I studied this whenever I was in Australia. And so I'm going to be talking about a very overlooked, and probably nobody really knows about this one unless they've listened to the podcast. And that's
because it's Katy's passion project.
It is so much. Listen, if I could have made a whole career just off of this, or just as a tourist, just go around the world just looking at these, I totally would, because it's just epiphytes.
Why don't you have an epiphyte tattoo, like on your shoulder?
I should.
You should.
I should, because I really do. They're fascinating, and then so I tried to keep this one as high level as I possibly could.
You mean like without like as little jargon as possible?
Well, not even that, because you could just go so in depth into like.
Gotcha.
Let's get into it. So epiphytes, what are they? The epiphytes are a type of plant that grows on another plant, most often other trees, but they aren't parasites. They don't draw nutrients from their host. Instead, they rely on air, rain, and debris that accumulates around them for sustenance. You could think of them as a guest who are perfectly content to just crash on the couch without raiding the fridge, which I think is an amazing example. Epiphytes are incredibly diverse, ranging from delicate orchids that you might be most familiar with, to bromeliads, which I think a lot of people
I do feel like actually a lot of people have heard of bromeliads.
Bromeliads, yeah, especially with like frogs and stuff.
Yeah.
And even ferns, like my favorite, the bird's nest fern, which I'm going to bring up later.
Probably we've talked about in our mosses and ferns episode.
Oh yeah, because that's my favorite. So what they all have in common, though, is their ability to thrive without rooting in soil, making their homes high in the tree canopy. These plants are more than just interesting, at least to me. They play a crucial role in forest ecosystems. By growing on trees, epiphytes take advantage of light and moisture available in the canopy, but they do so in very, very interesting ways. They can trap water and collect organic material, allows them to support a wide range of organisms from insects to even small amphibians.
So cute to imagine.
No, right? So cool. But there is a lot more to it. An epiphyte grow and they eventually decay. They contribute to the nutrient cycle within the forest. They help break down organic matter and return nutrients to the ecosystem, which benefits the trees and other plants around them. So why do epiphytes matter? Of course, like I just said, they're a key part of the forest biodiversity, supporting a variety of life forms in a relatively small space. All right, so now that we have a basic understanding of what an epiphyte is, let's zoom in a little bit closer into the microhabitat itself. One of my absolute favorite examples, like I said, is the bird's nest fern. So this plant has a unique way of forming a microhabitat right in the tree canopy. The bird's nest fern grows in a rosette shape, meaning its large, flat fronds form a natural basin in the center. And this basin is more just like a convenient structure. It's a life support system. So picture, you have your base. It's almost like a big bowl or like a big vase, like an open vase. And so you have your bottom, which is like all your organic matter. And then you have those fronds, the big leaves that'll go around it.
Like sheltering it.
Yeah, and so it's like a big hole in the open in the middle, but because of that, that's what makes your tiny ecosystem. So the fronds of the bird's nest fern, they collect the rainwater, fallen leaves, and other organic debris that drifts down from the trees above, and over time, this material breaks down, creating a moist, nutrient-rich environment. This little ecosystem supports a variety of life forms, like I said, tiny insects, spiders, and small amphibians, and it ends up being a self-sustaining garden high above the forest floor, which is awesome. But it really doesn't stop there. The bird's nest fern also creates a microclimate, which is my favorite.
So cool.
Yeah, my favorite part. The structure of the fern helps retain moisture, making the air within the fern, like the rosette part of it, slightly cooler and more humid than their surrounding canopy.
It's literally its own little terrarium.
It is. It definitely
just
is.
created a little terrarium.
Yeah. So imagine like standing in the forest, feeling cool, misty air that rises up from the ground from the rain, and then that same feeling, but way up in the tree tops, but it's just like 10 times more condensed.
And you're a little frog and you're
yeah,
in it.
Right? Right? Just like chilling, like this is so nice. So who ends up living in these tiny treetop microhabitats? Let's start with insects and other arthropods. So many small creatures find refuge within these protected environments of the bird's nest fern. Spiders, oftentimes a variety of spiders, spin their webs among the fronds, while ants and beetles end up going through the leaf litter on the bottom searching for food. And these insects are not just passing through, they're part of the thriving community, playing a crucial role in pollination, decomposition, and even as food for larger animals within that little ecosystem.
Yeah,
so it's like
cool.
It literally becomes its own food chain.
Tiny world.
Yeah, just all right there. Some amphibians, like I said, and reptiles also make their homes within epiphytes. For instance, small frogs might lay their eggs that water's collected by the fern fronds, and providing a safe place for their tadpoles to grow. Tiny lizards also often take shelter in the leaves, because I mean, again, that's got to be, I don't know, if I was a tiny lizard or tiny gecko or something, I'd be like, man, this is
absolutely
I hit the jackpot.
Safe, cool,
Yeah.
plenty of bugs to eat.
Yeah, it's
Never coming out.
Right? You're safe from predators like birds. I mean, birds can't really get in there because there's nothing for them to land on. Because you figure if they're going to land on anything, like the ferns aren't really going to support their weight, and they know that.
Yeah, I feel like you just have to worry about snakes.
Yeah. Besides the lizards and stuff like that, there are microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, and algae that also live in the damp, decaying material within the fern.
Probably specifically endemic to epiphytes.
Oh yeah, no, there are some species, and that was kind of what we were studying. There are some species of all of these that I'm talking about that are just found within certain epiphytes. Can be just found in one species of like this epiphyte over here and here, and that's like the only places that they're found. So the bacteria, fungi, and algae, they're kind of the ones that they end up breaking down all the organic material, just like in real world, like outside of the epiphyte.
In the big world, yeah.
Yeah, but it keeps the nutrients in the ecosystem healthy, and without them, the entire ecosystem would collapse, just like it does in, like Laura said, the real world. So we've talked a little bit about the epiphytes and the microhabitats they create, but why do these small, often overlooked places matter in the grand scheme of things? So let's just talk about biodiversity. Biodiversity, I know we've covered this a little bit in other ones, but I want to give the definition of it. It refers to the variety of life in a particular habitat or ecosystem. It's not just about the number of species, but also about the complexity of interactions between them. Mm-hmm. The microhabitats created by epiphytes, like the bird's nest fern, contribute significantly to biodiversity. By providing the shelter, food, and breeding grounds for a variety of organisms, these microhabitats help maintain a rich life within the forest. But the biodiversity isn't end up just being a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot, but it is crucial for the health and resilience of ecosystems. When an ecosystem is diverse, it is more resilient to changes and disturbances, whether those are natural like storms or droughts, or human-caused like deforestation. So each species in an ecosystem plays a role, and the loss of even a small microhabitat can, in fact, have ripple effects throughout the whole forest.
Yeah, so important. Like, every
it
role
really
is filled, and the more niches and roles there are, the more likely things are to work.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So then what ends up being our connection to this? Because again, that's what we always try to go back with these episodes. Okay, us as people, how do we connect back to this? Because people are like, okay, Katy, cool, you studied that in Australia, like...
Well, and if you don't care about biodiversity, but you should.
Right, whatever, people. I think everybody who's listening to this kind of...
Yeah.
at least can jump on the bandwagon, the biodiversity bandwagon.
I would jump on that one, not the one who does.
No, not the beluga bandwagon. So what's our connection to all of this? Well, Any of the microecosystems high within the tree canopy might seem distant from our daily lives, but the reality is that we're way more connected to these environments. So the health of these microhabitats affect the health of the entire forest, which in turn impacts global environment. Think about, again, it goes back to, and Laura and I have talked about this so many times, natural resources just in general. That's what natural resource management is. My master's degree is in.
We're going to beat you over the head with this, listeners.
Right? Yeah, right.
We need to manage our resources.
Yeah, which means the using it and conserving of it. All right. And so connection to us is, think about everything that we end up getting from the forest. These epiphytes, the bird's nest ferns, they play such a crucial role in not just the biodiversity, the breeding grounds, everything for so many different species. Again, it's all interconnected. And if one of these things ends up being plucked from it, it has that ripple effect throughout the whole forest. Think about like chocolate and stuff. I mean, I know we've talked about that before.
Yeah, geez. Not chocolate.
Yeah, and if you take out that one animal that pollinates, the cocoa plants and everything, boom, done. It's gone. It's gone. So a lot of these things, whenever people are like epiphytes, whatever, no, it's really awesome because we're way more connected to it than what most people think. So while there's never a conservation call for epiphytes in general, which I feel like this goes back to like the pygmy raccoon situation where we're all like, we need to make a campaign to conserve the pygmy raccoon.
Total side note, but my supervisor has been to Cozumel, and I was like, did you see the raccoons there? And she doesn't remember seeing them, but she thinks maybe. But I was like, dude.
Save the pygmy raccoons.
Save your raccoons.
But yeah, so nobody's going to be, unless I do, start Save the Epiphytes campaign here. But again, they play a crucial role in it because it is just the biodiversity and the ripple effect that it has. So yeah, so that's just your mini version of what an epiphyte is. If you're really interested in more, please reach out to me because I will talk about epiphytes way more in depth, like all day, any day.
Like any of this can get complicated.
It really can.
Because some
which is
people
so
spend their
cool.
whole lives studying this stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Like
and
not
it's
just
so
ecosystems,
neat.
like not just an ecologist, but like an epiphyte ecologist.
Yes. Yeah. Because of these micro ecosystems, because it is so interconnected. And I mean, you think, again, go back to any of our episodes where we talk about trees and how they communicate and just, okay, think of that then on a tiny, it's just a shrunken down version and it's just mini worlds.
I found a microecologist, and I was apparently the people who study this kind of stuff, and I was like, so cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
So neat.
Which also makes me laugh because I'm not super into microbiology.
Heck
like,
no.
I skip over the cell stuff for the most part, but microecology.
Ecosystem, yeah.
Now
totally
that
would be,
is interesting. Well, you were up high with plants. I'm going down low. First, I was like, I'll do soil. And then I was like, what are you thinking, Laura? Do moss. And I quickly looked up, is moss considered a microcosm? And yes, it is, just like epiphytes. The moss microcosm, aka the bryosphere. Okay, found that term, the bryosphere. So real quick, we did cover mosses in our episodes on mosses and ferns back in season 6. Go check it out. But as a quick reminder, mosses are ancient non-vascular plants, which means they can't send water up and down. There are about 12 to 15,000 different species, and they are found all over the world in every habitat, including Antarctica.
So cool.
So just like epiphytes, and we've also talked about tidal pools in the past as like another little tiny world.
Yep.
All of these tiny worlds are extreme environments.
Yeah.
And like
they're
resilient as hell.
Well, because they're their own planet. I mean, essentially they're their own planet.
It is literally, right, it's right. It's supposed to be its own tiny contained-ish world.
Yeah.
So like the epiphytes have to deal with the fact that there's no nutrients except for what falls into it.
Yep.
It's very similar with tide pools and this moss ecosystem. So they're used to extremes because sometimes moss can be super, super wet, while at other times it can be super, super dry and then rehydrate and immediately come back to life. It can hold micro droplets of water. So things like cilia, like little tiny microorganisms, can survive there. And they've discovered some moss that can be dehydrated for 100 years in the desert. And then as soon as rain touches it, it is alive again.
Nuts.
Yeah. And it grows on rocks with very little nutrients. And it doesn't freeze because it has antifreeze chemicals inside of it. So very, very extreme environment. According to Lindo and Gonzalez in their article, The Bryosphere, which I pulled a lot from, they define bryosphere as the combined complex of living and dead moss tissue and the associated organisms, representing a tightly coupled system, both above and below ground processes. So living and dead, and the stuff that lives in it, above and below ground. They actually pose that the bryosphere is its own, you know how there's like the hydrosphere, the lithosphere.
Yeah.
They're saying the bryosphere is actually probably encircling Earth too. And it is the in-between zone of like Earth and atmosphere. I'm looking at it in smaller scale patches here for these microcosms. Yeah. But inside, they are home to microflora, which is tiny plants, microfauna, teeny tiny animals, and mesofauna, which is like a little bit bigger but still really tiny because they can live in moss. Those organisms that live there, they're called bryobiota. Again, another cool word.
Bryobiota. Yeah, I was
Bryobiota. So let's start teeny tiny. Some are just unicellular that live in there. Think season 5, our protists episode, which is one of our most popular. Check it out.
Which is insane, but we'll get back to that at some other point. I told Laura, I was like, that is our highest downloaded episode, and I think it's only because there's probably some college students out there that they learn, and they're like, dude, I don't
desperately trying to find out what a protist is.
And then there's two idiots. There's two idiots talking about it, and their whole test relies on us.
I was just gonna say, hopefully we haven't failed them yet. We haven't heard anybody complain at us or angrily.
No.
Those unicellular things that live in moss are things like Paramecium, Euglena, which are like little things with one tail. They kind of look like plants, but also have animal characteristics because they're weird protists like that. Amoebas, diatoms, which are algae, ciliates, which are mostly like tiny, teeny single-celled predators. A huge variety of those, but they have to live in water because they have all the little thingies around the edges. And cyanobacteria, which is huge in moss. Yeah. It is photosynthetic, means it makes its own food, and it provides nitrogen to everybody else in this ecosystem. It cannot survive without it. And then, of course, there's tons of bacteria that live in moss. The rest are still tiny, but multicellular, and this is where things get interesting. So the microfauna, super tiny. And if you think about moss, okay, there is the plant, like the moss fiber, which is literally like can sometimes just be one single cell thick. And then there is a film of water that sticks to that moss spike, let's say. So a film, just a film of water. That's where these things live. In the film of water that surrounds the moss. They are the things like tardigrades, which probably has come up before in an episode. And I know some other...
We haven't exclusively talked about them, but it's definitely come up before.
Yeah, and Strange by Nature, shout out to another nature podcast. They did a really cool episode on tardigrades. But these little guys, I love to talk about. Their name means slow stepper, but they're also called moss piglets, moss bears, and water bears. Cute.
Slow steppers?
Slow steppers. There are 1,300 known species of tardigrades. But they all do kind of look like chubby little bears.
Wait, 1,300?
Yeah. Right? It's
That's
not just one species.
insane. I didn't realize
so many
it was
different
that
kinds.
many.
I mean, who knows how many are left to discover? I mean, living in water film. Yeah.
Exactly, because it's not like you can just like walk up on them and be like, "Oh, there's another species."
There's another
mine,
one.
at least for at least for the most part. Like we were doing census counts of insects within the epiphytes, but it's all what we could see.
Yeah, right, by the naked eye.
I didn't need to climb up to the forest canopy with a microscope, and I mean, instead of
right. So what I'm talking about, microfauna cannot be seen with the naked eye. Water bears have 4 pairs of legs, which is kind of creepy when you think about it, but whatever.
Yeah, a little bit.
Claws. They suck up food with a little tube mouth. Some species,
straw, if you will.
Some species you can tell the difference between male and female, and some are hermaphrodites. They can swing any which way. And like these things, we're talking things that cannot be seen with the naked eye. But these are animals. They have a nervous system and organs. Like a nervous system. A little teeny tiny tardigrade. They are amazing at surviving in extreme conditions. Check this. They go through what's called cryptobiosis, which is basically just death, but you're not actually dead. And that can be caused by drying out, freezing, not enough oxygen, or too much salt. So what happens is they shrink into themselves, they fold up into themselves, expel like all their water, and their metabolic activity drops to 0.01 of their normal state. Like, it is literally death, but not death.
Yeah, just the hanging on, literally the last string of life.
And then they secrete proteins that are found only in tardigrades that form a glass-like cocoon around each cell. So they just...
What the heck?
Yes. Yeah, like little glass things just floating around, and they call that the tune state. I don't know, TUN. And they can just reanimate instantaneously. You put some water on their suckers and they're good to go again. They have survived.
That's like that SpongeBob episode. My sister loves SpongeBob growing up.
When
But
they
he's
dry
like,
out.
water!
Yeah.
That's what I feel like. Water!
And then they're just okay again. If they're in their tune state, they're basically indestructible. They have survived space because they can survive UV radiation, the extreme pressure of the ocean. They have been found, they can live basically anywhere that there is water. The only thing that's found to have killed them is extreme heat when they are not in their tune state. So, like, they didn't have enough time to get their cocoon.
Are they just setting them on fire? Like,
they've actually, most recently, they've shot them out of guns to see if they can survive the impact of a bullet. I'm not joking. Like, that's like a little experiment. This poor little water bears, minding their own business, hanging out in the moss. Somebody pinches them up, puts them on a bullet, and shoots them out of a gun, just with all 4 pairs of legs.
But I just picture it with like goggles. Their cheeks are like flying.
The poor things. There are some things they cannot survive. They, for example, what did kill them?
Wait, pause. Wait, could they survive being shot out of a gun?
I feel like that they might have, but I can't remember. But what I do remember they couldn't survive was they couldn't survive the crash landing on Mars. Which, to be fair, that's fair. Extreme.
Yeah, right.
But they have survived, like, living on
humans can't even do like 99% of what they can do, and we're just like pushing them to the extreme.
Yeah,
and, like,
if I sit on the couch too long in a weird position, I feel like I'm broken. Meanwhile,
we're like, let's shoot these little things out of a gun. Can they survive? Let's crash them on Mars.
Oh. Tardigrades, underrated, so cute, so cool. Rotifers, also kind of cool. They're actually called wheel animals, which sounds like something.
How do you spell
out of,
that?
like,
I gotta look that up real quick.
What, rotifer?
Yeah, how do you spell that?
Rotifer.
Okay.
They look a little bit like like an anemone.
Yeah.
But they are an animal. They have a single foot to move or hold on, and they have a little like crown on their head of cilia that basically grabs onto things and shoves food into their mouth because they're basically just a giant mouth. But they do have nerves and organs, and they're actually sexually dimorphic, so you can tell female rotifers from male rotifers.
Did not know that.
And then the last of the microfauna, so not by the naked eye, are nematodes. Little teeny tiny microscopic worms. They are the most numerous animal on Earth, and they eat bacteria, fungi, and those protozoans I was talking about. All right, a little bit bigger and almost done. What else lives in the moss? The mesofauna, which you can see with the naked eye. These don't live in the water film. These live in the air pockets between the moss fibers. So, still tiny. The mites, there are tons of different mites that live in moss. They are technically arachnids, like a spider, but not quite the same. There are some that love moss more than others, and they're actually just called moss mites. That's Orbatida, but there's a million other ones. They are the dominant mesofauna in most mosses. So, like, the biggest thing, the most dominant thing you're going to find there, mites. So if this was like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, it'd be the mites you're going to have to look out for. They eat fungi, bacteria, and soil particles. Little tiny springtails, they're soil-dwelling insects, and you can see them with the naked eye. If you dig up soil, okay, so the nematodes might be the most numerous animal on Earth, but springtails can't be far behind. Because in 1 cubic meter of soil, there's about 100,000 springtails.
Wow.
They're just chomping through soil. And they eat dead stuff and microbes. But the reason they're called springtails is because they have this thing. It's not actually a tail, but they have this thing underneath of them. And when they get nervous or they're breeding, they can yeet themselves to safety.
Nervous or breeding.
Yeah. 20 to 30 times their own body length. Just
what? Yeah, they have performance anxiety. They're like, you know what? I can't do this. And just
look how high I can go.
Yeah. Just bounce out of there.
there's, of course, myriapods, which are like millipedes and centipedes and things. And then proturans, which I'd never even heard of this organism. But they call them coneheads, which I thought was funny. Very little is known about them. They weren't even discovered until 1907. That's how unimportant they are.
Jeez.
But they are in the soil.
How unimportant they are.
And then lastly, what's in there? Fungi. Can't have moss without fungi, and it makes it look better too. Hundreds of species have been found to grow only with moss. Some live on the dead parts, some live on the living parts of the moss. They can be parasitic, saprobic, which means sucking from the moss, commensal, which means, cool with each other, or pathogenogenic, which is like a disease. But fungi are completely tied to moss. So all of the things that live in this moss, they live in an extreme environment, so they can go dormant. And what lives in moss is kind of cool because it depends on the age and size of the moss patch. All right. So let's say this is a freshly colonized place. Moss is a colonizer plant, so it's usually the first thing that grows on bare earth. So the first species to show up are the ones that just blow in on the wind. So you're talking like teeny, 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 teeny. And then the older it gets, the deeper the moss gets, the bigger the patch. It can start to get, you actually get layers, and then you start to get more species. But it does peter off near the end, because if you think about it, moss, the whole point of moss is it's all part of the decomposer. Everything that lives there is essentially a decomposer. Moss is a plant that just eventually makes soil.
Yeah.
So the older, if it's a really old patch of moss, it starts to not even have bryobiota anymore. It just becomes a traditional soil community. So the moss is done. At the end of its life, it's just like any old under the log community.
Yeah.
No more colonizers. So these micro ecosystems, like Katy was saying, you were saying that this is essential. And truly, they are critical to larger ecosystems. They might be self-contained worlds, but they're not in a lab. So they're not completely self-contained. They are part of something larger. So moss and the things that live there, these little worlds, they aid soil. Like, they aid the soil nutrient cycle. They store massive amounts of carbon from the atmosphere. They're sucking it in and they're holding on to it. Think of like the peat moss. When that stuff goes up, it's just releasing insane amounts of smoke and carbon.
Yeah.
Moss and the cyanobacteria that live there are basically what is fixing nitrogen in this planet back into the soil. It captures organic debris. It forms its own microclimate just like the epiphytes do. So we talked about this before with the trees, I think, where they talked about trees that have moss under it do better because it insulates their roots.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think
moss actually can change temperature right below the soil. So it can like keep temperature stable. It decomposes and it holds water.
Like an earth koozie.
Totally. It's an earth koozie. or blankie. Yeah. It also holds water, which prevents flooding and creates wetlands and new habitats for completely new animals. And just like Katy was saying, I'm glad we're on the same page about this.
Always.
Even if you don't care about any of that, which you should, because it's actually how the whole planet works.
Right.
How does it help us? For years, human beings have used moss as antiseptic wound dressings because it does have antiseptic properties.
Yeah.
You're probably just adding tardigrades to your wound, but they're helping.
They're the actual just like nurses in there like they're fixing everything,
knitting you together with all their clothes.
Yeah, right.
So cute. They got their little nurse hats on. Moss, at least a certain type of moss I could find, has been used in constipation relief, which I really need to find out more about that because I was
just saying, I was like, that sounds like a whole other episode.
Yeah. And then skincare. Apparently moss is pretty good for your skin. At least some cultures have found it to be, which I'm not that surprised. Moisture probably. And yeah, so helps the world. Microcosms. I also have a fun activity. If anybody, teachers are listening out there, highly recommend. The coolest thing about moss is because it's so small and it's not as specialized as Katy's epiphytes, you can study an ecosystem in your classroom. If you look up mosssafari.com does a really good job of, some educator out there has created a PowerPoint presentation on how to do this with your class. What are the most common things to find in it? How to suck up the water. You can just do it in the classroom with your kids. Check it out. They can look at their own microcosm.
And that was called, what was the website again?
mosssafari.com.
Nice.
Yeah. We are surrounded by teeny tiny little worlds, and so many people don't appreciate it. But if you know me at all, you will notice that I will stop on a trail to be like, check out that moss. Yeah. Check out that moss. I belong to the Moss Appreciation Society on Facebook. I know we brought that up before.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. I am like struck by the beauty of these tiny things. And like the epiphytes, I'm sure I could stare like into one of those for hours.
Oh my gosh. Yes, because of everything that's going on. It is literally a tiny city that
it's like
just going
it's the
on.
closest thing we're ever gonna get to be to God. You know what I mean? Like you're like, I am looking at a contained world.
Yeah.
But I'm above it.
Laura just likes playing God. That's all that it really comes down to.
Yeah. I just want to look at it and know that I am better than everything there. No.
I can squish it all.
But also, I do feel like I remember how much comfort it kind of gave me during the pandemic. I remember going outside, literally thinking this exact thought was I was sitting in the creek and I was appreciating the creek and I was watching little fish swim. And I thought, you know what? If this is it, everything is going to go on without us and it's going to be okay. Sometimes like looking at these little worlds, I'm like, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. Look at this. Look at this little system right here. It's going to keep on going.
Yeah. We're really the ones that are messing it up.
It helps relieve my stress to just know that like something out there is working this efficiently.
That's fair. All right, guys. Well, first episode of season 10. Laura and I will get back into the swing of all of this. I guess next week you guys will hear then the first Cave Chronicles episode.
I think it's yours. I think we're going to do yours first.
Okay, I'm so looking forward to it.
I am too. I think you're going to like what I've got. And I tried to mix it up. I did biological and archaeological.
I did too. Mix. Yeah, no, I did too. Yeah. Awesome. All right, well, thank you guys for listening.
Check us out on social, but like we don't really do social very much anymore.
Yeah, listen,
Patreon
that takes time.
Do the Patreon.
Yeah, Patreon. Yeah, and so here's the thing, guys. So because we have social media takes up so much dang time, we're gonna be really heavily relying on Patreon to post stuff now, just so it's one place. All the cool stuff is in one place. That way we don't have to worry about like a gajillion channels. And I mean, what we're doing so far is working. So
yeah, and like truly, if you really want to get a hold of us, send us a message on something like Facebook because I'll get a notification. Like, reach out, totally. We're not, like, regularly posting.
Yeah, no, we just don't have time for that anymore. Yeah, just don't have time for it.
I got time for that.
Yeah, no, so definitely check us out on Patreon. We'll be posting a lot more stuff over there.
We're back, baby.
Tune in next week to Cave Chronicles, and then we will talk to you then, and then a longer episode after that.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.